Welcome back to the Calaveria podcast, your one-stop shop for all things supernatural. I'm your host, Jose, and I'm with...
Hi guys, it's me, Samantha.
That's right, everybody. Samantha is back for this episode, just like I said, just like I promised. And, I mean, for this episode, we do have something special planned for you guys, right? I know I said we have a really good episode for you guys. It's going to be the last episode for the year. But before we get on, we do have to talk about a little things. I know Samantha has a little announcement for this episode, so Samantha, take it away.
You guys can't realize I'm a little sick. I sound a little stuffy. You know, I'm sorry if I sound bad and everything like that. But that's kind of just what I just have to say right now.
Yeah, you know, we know Samantha wasn't in the last episode because she was sick. And she got better, but this time I guess it's just like that seasonal flu. I know a lot of people have been getting sick, and it just seems like it got Samantha. But I mean, that's not going to stop her because she's back with us today. But before we get on to the episode, I do want to start out by saying I hope everybody had a great holiday season. For those of you that celebrated Christmas, I hope you guys had a great Christmas. I know Samantha and I did, you know, spending time with our family. It was overall just a fun experience. And I mean, hey, I hope you guys got whatever you wanted, whatever you asked for Christmas. And for those of you that didn't or that don't celebrate Christmas, I hope you guys had a great time with your family and friends nonetheless. And so we all know, you know, with this time of year, this comes like the end of the year, right? So we're going to be going into the new year, 2023. And it's just really cool to look back at, you know, we started this podcast a little bit towards like the, I guess, halfway throughout the year. I guess more than halfway throughout the year. We started in July, so like a month, right? But it's cool to see how we've gone so far. I mean, this is going to be our 13th episode for this year. And I mean, we're going to have much, much more coming in this next 2023, right? So before we start, I do want to just talk about, you know, our New Year's resolutions. So, I mean, I guess I'll start off first. For my New Year's resolution, I'm kind of, you know, I would just want to just, for one, do more with the podcast. I want the podcast to grow, obviously. We're continuously doing our episodes, whether we're sick, whether we're not, you know, so we're just putting in the work. So I would like to see it grow. As for myself, I mean, I would like to just kind of get my life on track, I guess you could say. You know, I mentioned in a previous episode that I was applying to law school. I have finally applied. So now I'm just sitting back waiting for those either rejections or acceptance letters, right? So hoping for acceptance letters, but that's for me, right? So that's my New Year's resolution. So Samantha, what would you say your New Year's resolution is?
I haven't really thought about my New Year's resolutions, but I guess one of them with dealing with the podcast is definitely trying to be a part of more episodes, you know, because I've been sick, I've been busy with school. And a personal one, I guess just getting through the next semester. You know, I have some pretty tough classes coming up, but I'm sure I'll get through them. But those are like, I'm just hoping I do good, basically.
Yeah, and so, you know, here at the podcast, we're wishing everybody a happy new year, right? Because we won't release an episode until the new year, and this one's going to be releasing right before the new year. So hope everybody stays safe, for one. Everybody be careful out there, especially if you're going to be driving late at night. We already know what goes on during New Year's, and we don't need any accidents, right? So for one, this is a PSA. If you guys didn't hear anywhere else, you're going to hear it here. Don't drink and drive. Ask a friend, you know, a family member, Uber, just anything. Don't drink and drive, though, right? This is not the first time we've had to say this on the podcast, and it probably won't be the last time, but hopefully those of you listening, you know, hopefully you guys know better, right? It's not the thing to mess around with. Be careful, be safe out there, and overall just have a good time. With all that said and done, we have 2 more interesting cases for you guys. This is going to be what I believe is 2 firsts for the podcast, actually. So without further ado, let's get into it.
We all have wondered if aliens were real. And if they are, have they ever visited us? Some people believe that they have, and some even claim to have been abducted and experimented on by them. Today, I'm going to be telling you guys about one of the most famous cases of these abductions, and that is the case of Betty and Barney Hill. Their story would largely define many of the stories of alien abductions that we see today. Their story starts with Betty and Barney Hill spontaneously going out on a very late honeymoon in September of 1961. They planned to go to Montreal and the Niagara Falls. They went for a nice 3-day trip, but on their last trip, they were relaxing in a diner before they were going to get on the road and head back home. It is on this ride back the strangest thing would happen to the couple. While on the road, the couple both noticed this strange light in the sky. At first, they assumed maybe it's just a star or a satellite. Barney was well acquainted with many different aircrafts, since his hobby was plane watching. Plus, he was a World War II vet, so his experiences helped him ensure not only him, but his wife, that they had nothing to worry about. That was until they realized that the light seemed to be following the car, almost as if the light didn't want to get the car out of its sight. The couple again tried to rationalize what they were seeing by thinking maybe it's just an illusion from being inside of a moving car. But after a bit of the strange light following them, they grew curious and decided to pull over. They looked at the light through some binoculars and saw that it was indeed some kind of object just spinning around in the air. This is the moment when the couple knew this was no star or satellite. They had no clue what this light was coming from. They returned to their car and watched the light as they drove away. It wasn't until it was above the treetops by at least 100 feet that Barney was bold and stopped the car, pulling out his handgun and leaving the car and Betty to go investigate. That is when he saw an aircraft that was as big as a jet but round and flat as a pancake. He wondered what the hell he was looking at. He was able to see into the window of the strange aircraft with the binoculars, and inside he saw gray beings standing there, staring back at him. He thought instantly to pull out his gun, but some voice told him to not stop looking at them. Something inside of Barney snapped, and he quickly rushed over to the car and began to blare down the road. He was convinced they were going to be captured. Betty watched the strange aircraft follow them. Then out of nowhere, the sound of rhythmic beeps began to swallow the couple in their car, and they instantly felt tired and fell asleep.
What the heck?
Yeah. So this is where like the thing starts getting kind of crazy. Like their story gets crazier.
Yeah, that's kind of weird because initially he sees the gray beings, right? And then I feel like they kind of did some sort of like telekinesis, I guess. Because it said like something told him,
don't stop looking at us.
Exactly. Like something told him not to. Oh my god, that's weird. Okay, so what happened next?
It wasn't until 2 hours later and 35 miles further down the road that the couple woke up in the car. Barney's shoes were scuffed up and Betty's dress was torn. They didn't remember anything from the moment that they heard all those like weird beeping noise and they started feeling tired to the moment that they just woke up and his shoes were all messed up and her dress was torn.
Oh man.
And so I guess after this experience, the couple just started having issues sleeping. You know, Betty had some bad dreams. She just couldn't fall asleep without having these weird dreams that she couldn't really put her like head like, why am I having these like strange dreams? And they also started suffering from mental health issues. Barney had really bad anxiety, such bad anxiety he started getting stomach ulcers like repeatedly. And so they decided to seek out professional help and they went to the doctor, Benjamin Simon. Dr. Simon helped them recover facts about what occurred to them during those 2 hours that they basically don't remember anything of. And those 2 hours is kind of crazy. Let me tell you about what they recalled.
Okay.
After falling unconscious, Betty and Barney were carried by the gray beings onto the strange aircraft, and they were tested on. They remembered being separated and stripped from their clothes as the gray beings started to collect samples of their hair, their nails, and their skin. This was then followed by the aliens putting multiple and different sized needles all over them. Betty noted that they had put this pretty large needle down in like her belly button, and she kind of thinks it was like a pregnancy test, but she just remembers that it hurts super, super bad.
Right, I mean, I would imagine. That's weird. I can't imagine anybody sticking anything in my belly button.
When I read that, I was just like, oh, that sounds horrible. Ugh.
Yeah, that's just that type of thing that makes you like, just, I don't know, like one of those things where you could just kind of feel it, like, in a sense.
One thing I do want to talk about when I was like researching like what they discovered during these 2 hours, I guess, through like this session with Dr. Simon, was that Betty noted that when she was like getting her testing done with like the needles and kind of just sitting there, I guess, the gray beings or like the aliens, they came like kind of rushing into her room, like laughing and kind of excitedly, she said. And then they were like, oh my gosh, the other human couldn't remove his teeth. And they realized like Barney's teeth like were able to be removed and that they were just so excited by that.
They had like dentures or something?
And yeah, so Betty had to explain to them like, oh, those are dentures and it's because he's old. He had to get dentures.
That's funny.
And so it's kind of, I was like, what the heck? Like that was one of the instances she remembered while they were testing on her. All of this was like kind of rediscovered through hypnosis, because hypnosis was a very like popular method during this time to recover like any trauma, go through anything without having the person like while helping the person like during with like psychiatric help basically.
Right. See, like, yeah, because I've heard of that before with like criminal cases that sometimes the police would even suggest like an eyewitness or a victim take or undergo hypnosis to like try to remember exactly what happened or what they saw. So I'm well aware. When did you say this happened again? Was this like in the 70s, 80s?
This was during the 60s, so this was like 1961 basically.
Oh, okay.
And so yeah, Dr. Simon, like, he would have sessions with them that he would basically like try and rediscover what happened during these 2 hours, and that's what they kind of like went over, like, oh, they remembered like the gray beings, how they looked like, and I'll get into that later and everything, like how they looked like, because I do have pictures.
Oh, okay.
And they also like discovered like, okay, this is what they tested me on, and they remember that there was this one alien that I'll just call them aliens, but they did call them like gray beings basically, was just kind of off to the side, not really doing anything, but like observing the other aliens doing stuff. And they called this one like kind of like the leader basically. And so Betty noted that after like the experimentation, she was able to have like kind of like alone time to just talk to the leader one, I guess. And she asked them, where are we in the universe? Where had we flown to? Because she knew she was in space, but she didn't know. She told the leader, like, I don't know anything about space, anything like that. I just know we're from Earth or whatever. And the leader gave her this explanation that if you don't know where you are right now, there would be no point in explaining where we are. And like, I feel like that's kind of phrased a little weird. And I was just like, when I read that, I was just like, what? But like, I
guess in a sense, he's kind of just saying, like, if you don't even know where we are, then why bother asking? Something along those lines. But I mean, obviously it sounds a lot more like complicated, but I guess that's kind of what I'm getting from that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting from it too. Like, he's kind of just being like, if you don't even know where we are, like, there's no reason in even telling you.
Right, he's kind of just telling her, like, don't even ask me. Like, it's not worth my time.
That's kind of like the basis of the story, right? So they have this really strange experience with the light, and they have 2 hours that they don't remember after like kind of falling asleep out of nowhere in the drive. And then they start having problems, health problems, mental health issues, not being able to sleep. They go to the doctors. The doctor helps them with hypnosis, and they rediscover a bunch of things that happened during those 2 hours. One major thing that came out of this, it came out of like the help from Dr. Simon, I guess, is that they recalled things like how the alien spaceship was shaped, and they drew it. And they also recalled things that they saw inside the spaceship. Like, Betty saw a star map and she drew it out. And then I'll talk about that a little bit more. Barney also drew what he remembered the aliens looked like, basically. And let me show you that right now.
Okay.
So here, this is a drawing done by Barney. And you could see, like, it's kind of like flat like a pancake. I could see where, like, how he said that. It's very much like a disc shape, kind of.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting like a Jetsons type of vibe from it. Like, it kind of looks like, I mean, the best way I can kind of describe it is like, it looks like a tambourine shape, I guess.
Yeah.
And it has like the windows, kind of like a penthouse, like a really high up like penthouse, like in New York, where you can look out, but like tambourine shape, I guess.
One thing I found interesting is that like the red lights that we'll obviously post this picture on our Instagram, at calaveriapod. But when you look at the picture, like, you could see that like the red lights on the side, or like these like circles on the side that he drew, they expand out when it started following them closer to their car, before like basically when it actually started like chasing them a little bit, and like they were looking at it more closer. I guess the lights like spread apart, and so I guess it was going into like it's like faster mode or something.
Okay, would you say that, or would you say, so like, okay, like if I remember correctly, right, a voice tells them like, don't stop looking, don't look away, right? That's as they're following them, right? Where you would say that the bottom picture or illustration where the lights are out, would you say that's like the form that it's in that moment?
I would say that I feel like the top photo is probably like the one that it was in at that moment. But then as soon as like
when
Barney
they like initially saw it, right?
As soon as Barney darts into his car is like kind of like the second one, where it starts chasing them more.
Once they get in their car and they're like, okay, we gotta like leave, but okay, I can't stop looking at it. What if like, yeah, like you said, what if that's like as they're leaving, as they're going, but what if those lights are part of the reason that they kind of like, I guess, knocked out in a sense, like they don't remember those 2 hours, like what if that helped them kind of like erase the memory? Because that's kind of something that's like common with these like UFO abductions, is there's like a loss of time where they can't recall what happened from this time to that time, that sort of thing. So what if these red lights kind of have something to do with that?
Yeah, I feel like the red lights are very much, there's something important about them for sure. And I feel like that would be interesting, and like that's a really interesting thing to say, like what if they are like kind of like the thing that maybe put them to sleep, or somehow it's just a device that we don't know what it's truly used for, I guess.
Right, it could be something like a Men in Black thing, you know, like how they erase their memory with that little like flashlight thingy, like little pen. So it could be something like that. I mean, who knows? Obviously, these are advanced beings, and obviously we don't know what kind of technology they have.
Exactly. So this next picture looks a little confusing, but so the drawing on the right was created from just memory, from Betty's memory after, like, you know, the hypnosis sessions. And it was a star map that she saw on the spacecraft that she was like looking at when talking to like the supposed leader and stuff. That's what she remembered. Later years, like I can't remember, I couldn't find like exactly when it was connected to stars with Zeta Reticuli like system. I don't know, something in the universe. I am not an astronomy person, so I don't know.
An astronomer.
But, yeah, I'm not an astronomer. The Zeta Reticuli, I guess, was like kind of like where it got connected, and reticuli.
I mean, we'll post it on there too, so you guys can see the spelling.
Yeah, we'll post it. We'll put what it's called. But that's the picture on the left. It's pictures of those stars and like kind of like in the system and like the shape that they are in. I believe the person that connected them was Marjorie Fish.
Okay, and it looks like very similar, like just kind of flipped, I guess, in a sense. That's interesting.
So it is very interesting. Like you see, like definitely like the shapes are there. You see, like it's very weird that Betty, like, you know, she said like I don't know anything about the sky, the universe, and everything like that. She wasn't into astronomy, nothing like that. And she just drew this from memory, and that later on, someone that knew, I guess, more about this was just like, I've seen that before. And then they said like it looks very similar to, you know, the Zeta
Reticuli, right?
Whatever.
Reticuli.
I can't say
okay.
it. Sorry.
Okay, wait. So where did this happen again?
It's happened in New Hampshire.
Okay, so I don't know anything about New Hampshire. I mean, yeah, I don't know anything about New Hampshire, but I would just, you know, I don't want to be rude or anything, but I wouldn't imagine that, you know, Betty, I mean, I'm just assuming here, right? I have no idea who she is, but like, I'm just assuming she's not a scientist or anything, like, right? So it's kind of weird that she was able to kind of like articulate something, or like, you know, illustrate something that hasn't even really been, I guess you could say, discovered in a sense, because you mentioned it wasn't until somebody by the name of Marjorie Fish kind of connected it to the drawing. So like, it's weird that some random lady in New Hampshire first illustrated something that just so happened to be, you know, like a star formation.
Yeah, that's one thing. That's like one of the biggest like pieces of evidence. And like some people, like, though I think there's some astronomers like that try to debunk it. You know, they're like, oh, it doesn't really look like it, or oh, like there's like evidence out there from different people that are obviously more like well versed in astronomy. They have their own opinions to it. But I guess from like just our standpoint, and just from like the common person that sees us, they're like, no, they look very similar. Like,
yeah, it really
you could see that they are very, very close. I think it is very, very interesting, because I think it wasn't, I don't even think like the Zen reticuli was even like just not, I don't want to say discovered, or basically it wasn't really noted and like drawn like this, or like, I'll say discovered for now, because that's basically what they were saying. And when I was researching like this photo, because there was a lot of debate towards it, Betty Hill, like, she drew this before like Zen reticuli was even like known, basically.
Right. Okay.
And so that's why the connection came so far after. And that's what's so interesting about the fact that she was able to draw this before this was before the Zen reticuli was even like kind of discovered.
Yeah. So like, I mean, imagine you're an astronomer, right? You're working. You've been, you know, an astronomer for years. You think you figure something out, or you find something that possibly, you know, no other astronomer or other scientist or anybody studying like the universe or space has discovered. only to find out that some random woman in New Hampshire who claims she was abducted literally illustrated the exact thing that you found. Like, how would you feel, for one? And then what would that, like, kind of, where would that put you in? Like, and like, what kind of state of mind would you be thinking, like, how in the world did this lady figure this out? Or would you, kind of start thinking, like, maybe she wasn't lying? Because, like I said, I don't mean to be rude, but I just don't think that Betty is this well versed in, like, space and astronomy. No shots towards Betty at all, but, like, I find it very hard to believe.
I mean, she even said it herself. She's like, I don't really know anything about the universe. She told the aliens that. She was like, I don't know nothing. And he was just like, well, if you don't know nothing, I'm not going to tell you anything because you're not going to understand. And so, like, I think it's just, this picture is very interesting. And there's tons of debate out there. Like, you guys could definitely do your own research. But I feel like this is a very, very interesting evidence to, like, this story pointing to be true. And so I definitely wanted to bring close attention to specifically this drawing by Betty. My last photo for this case is the drawings by Barney Hill. So this is Barney Hill's drawing of the gray beings that he saw on the spaceship, I feel like the top one kind of reminds me of the Grinch for some reason, just like a little bit. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think it's possibly the eyes.
I think so. Like the bottom ones, like they're just kind of creepy.
Okay, so that's my question. Did he draw the bottom ones too, or was that something where like kind of like a sketch artist helped them with?
I think the top one was the one he drew when he was probably like in the hypnotic state or whatever, and then the bottom ones are like more like a refined touch after like discussing it more and someone probably helping him.
Okay, yeah, because I'm like, these look like very different. Like it looks like the top one it looks like you drew something with your eye closed, and then the bottom one looks like somebody who actually knows how to draw. But it's weird.
When I tried looking up like specific photos for the aliens, the top one is definitely like the most popular one, so I'm pretty sure that was definitely drawn by him. And a bunch of artists like also like took his descriptions and then kind of did their own take to it. So I feel like that's probably what the bottom ones are too.
Okay, see, like they kind of look like lizards.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. They look very reptilian.
Yeah, there you go. That's the word. By any chance, did they describe like them being tall or little or?
They didn't really describe like how tall they were. I think I remember like them saying like some of them were short, but I don't think like they did note that the tables they were sitting at for like the experiments were pretty short, and like Barney was able to like touch the ground with them. So
okay, so they might be relatively small.
In my head, I was just like, maybe they're a little shorter.
That's still so scary. Oh my god.
So this is the last photo I'm going to be talking about, because I feel like this is one of the last like most notable and like interesting drawings they did or kind of like discussed in their hypnotherapy. And like, yeah, this is the case of like Betty and Barney Hill. They said they were abducted, and this is one of the earliest and like most famous cases of alien abduction. Like after this, there were tons and tons more like stories coming out like, oh, I was abducted, and they all kind of sort of followed like the same, I guess you could say, formula structure, of what theirs was. Oh, there was memory loss. Oh, they experimented on me. They probed me with needles too, blah, blah, blah. They took samples of my hair, of my skin, whatever. I talked to them. They showed me blah, blah, blah. Like gray beings, like the drawings and everything like that. Like ever since after this, they kind of defined like the genre basically.
Okay, so I guess you could kind of argue that, like, I guess one of two things, right? Either that, like, because they shared their story, other people who've had these experiences were probably like, okay, you know what? I want to share my story too, or I'm not scared to share it anymore. Like, I don't want to look. It could have been the thing like they didn't want to look crazy or whatever, right? But now that they hear that these other people also experienced something, so they're like, okay, yeah, this happened to me too. Or it could just be, like being the skeptic, right? Thinking about like, oh, well, they just want fame, and they just want to start making up this story too because they want to have all this publicity, and sort of like a publicity stunt basically, right? So I guess I could see how one person could think one thing and the other think, something else. I am personally of the belief that there are aliens, because I don't know, I find it very hard to believe that we're the only people in this entire universe, or only beings in this entire universe. Like, I can't believe that. But I don't know what they look like. So I don't know if they're going to look like reptiles. I don't know if they're going to look like us. or what exactly they may look like. So I don't know what boat I am in that.
One thing I do want to note is that at first, they were having these hypnotherapy sessions with Dr. Simon, and they didn't go to the newspaper or anything like that. And they only got famous after they went to New Hampshire newspaper and told them this is our story, this is everything. After that, they got famous from that, and that's when the story started coming out. So maybe I feel like some people were like, oh, this happened to me too. But then also some people were kind of hopping on the bandwagon, trying to get a hit of the fame and whatever. So they weren't in it to get any fame, famous or anything like that. They kind of just I feel like maybe their therapist was like, this is kind of crazy, you should go to the newspaper.
Yeah, okay, I think that makes it a bit more credible, because like I said, people could just say oh, I want my 15 minutes of fame or something like that too. But if they went through all of this before even contacting the news or the newspaper or any media, right, they obviously were concerned to see what happened to me, and they got all the help before they actually went out to do it, rather than, let's just say, it happened to them, and then the next day they're going around to everybody, I got abducted and this and that. So I could definitely see that.
That leads me to believe their story a little bit more, because they kind of waited until they were okay, this is kind of affecting us mentally and physically now already. It's impacting our health and whatever. So they go to the hypnotherapist, go to the psychiatrist, they're going to get help. And then after, they're let's tell our story. Let's actually tell our story and say, this is crazy. We're discovering this weird experience happened to us. And it makes me believe them a little bit more, And I am also of the belief that there are definitely aliens out there. I don't know what they look like. I don't know if they'll look like us. I don't know if they'll look completely different. I've never had an experience. I don't know. But I definitely do believe in aliens.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to meet them either, though, because I don't want to any needles in my belly button or anything like that. Because even though it wasn't anything severe, they still had mental illness, mental problems, and physical problems too. So that's just scary. I don't want to experience anything like that.
That's true. They were abducted, I feel like that is a pretty traumatic experience.
No, for sure. Especially when, it's traumatic, obviously, if it's, another human being, but then imagine it's something that you literally can't even fathom what they are. That's just got to be a whole nother level of trauma.
Exactly. But that's the case of Betty and Barney Hill. It's I'm pretty sure if you haven't heard of this case, well, now you do, obviously. But this is one of the most famous cases of alien abduction, and since we are doing the first on this episode, I wanted to talk about alien abductions and just aliens in general with this case, because I find it a very interesting case, and it's the first one I thought of when I wanted to talk about aliens.
Yeah, I never heard of it before. I know before we started recording you mentioned that I may have heard of it, but no. So that's cool. If you guys have any alien stories, any UFO encounters, anything like that, let us know for sure.
And with that, I would like to thank my sources. First is the article How Betty and Barney Hill Alien Abduction Story Defined the Genre, written by Linda Lucina on History.com. And the article Is It Finally Proof? Abducted Woman Draws Star Map of Exact Constellation of Alien Home, written by Jenny Pascal on www.express.co.uk.
Okay, so I'm glad you introduced the UFO genre into the podcast, but with my next case, I'll also be introducing a first to the podcast. So the case that I have for us today is, like I said, it's going to be a first for the podcast, and that's going to be an exorcism. And more specifically, this is going to be the exorcism of George Lukins. So this case is one of the more famous exorcisms in history. If you were to search up on Google or anywhere, right, this is going to be one of the first ones that will pop up. So beginning in 1769, George Lukins, a man from the English village of Yatton, began to exhibit, quote, fits of an alarming nature, which some have attributed to being epilepsy. Lukins was a tailor by trade, but also dabbled in performing arts. He was a singer, ventriloquist, and even acted in Christmas murmurs, which are basically Christmas time plays, kind of think like Christmas carols, right? So back in the day, that's what they used to do. They would kind of perform plays outside of your house. So it was during one of these plays that George experienced something that he called a divine slap, which quite literally knocked him down and would be credited with beginning his bizarre behavior. Now, I do want to say that what George called the divine slap, many actually attributed to alcohol and George being intoxicated. This divine slap seemed to get him real good because George would have to be taken home by two of his neighbors as he was unable to function on his own. And shortly after this experience, George began to experience fits that included seizures that rendered him unable to speak, acting violently, and even arguing with himself. On top of this, Lukins was known to imitate animals, specifically barking like a dog. It was said that each of these fits would begin and end with the agitation of his right hand. Many of the townspeople, including Lukins himself, began to suspect that he was bewitched. George would try to continue his daily life despite his fits, but it soon became too much for him. He would be unable to continue working, and in 1775, Lukins' parish sent him to St. George's Hospital in London for examination. During his time there, George's seizures seemed to stop, but doctors were unable to treat his epilepsy and was therefore deemed incurable. Many doctors were brought in an attempt to cure George of his sickness, but none were able to do so. Seeing that modern medicine wasn't able to help him, Lukins was speculated to have sought help from cunning folk, which are basically people that practice magic or witchcraft. One such individual suggested that, quote, indigent and infirm old people were responsible for his experiences. This resulted in Lukins attacking an old woman in order to get her blood. Clearly, there was still something wrong with him despite no longer experiencing seizures, and now it was getting dangerous for others. George would ultimately leave the hospital and go back to Yutton to stay with a man by the name of Richard Beecham. During his time with Beecham, the fits stopped, and even after he moved out, he was said to not have experienced any episodes for over a decade. At this point, anyone would think, great, he's better and he's back to normal, right?
Right.
Well, that all changed in 1787 when his seizures returned. And now, instead of claiming to be bewitched, George now claimed he was being possessed by 7 devils or demons, and that he could only be helped by 7 clergymen. Lukins began to break out into fits once again. The people of Yutton were well aware of George's fits. I would like to think that they were all like, yeah, that's George, he does that sometimes. Like, it kind of became, like, I guess you could say, like, the town fool, that sort of thing, like, he became known for...
Everyone kind of just knew that he was a little crazy.
Yeah, and I think that's what it was, so, like, everybody just kind of accepted it for who he was. He already was sent to the hospital, and, it just seemed like nothing, or I guess it worked in a sense, even though they weren't able to necessarily help him. It just kind of went away on its own, and now it's back, so they're just like, whatever, that's George. So on May 31st, 1788, a woman by the name of Sarah Barber, who attended Temple Church in nearby Bristol, shared George's story and condition with her vicar, which is basically a clergyman or someone who helps in running a specific church, and she ended up asking him if he could help. Barber shared with her vicar, Reverend Joseph Easterbrook, George's claims of possession and that only with the help of 7 clergymen could he be saved. She must have been real convincing because Easterbrook soon met with Lukins in the church in order to assess whether he was actually possessed or not. And it was during these examinations that Easterbrook and his colleagues were said to have been, quote, struck with horror and amazement at the sounds and expressions which they heard, and the unaccountable agitations and convulsions which they beheld. It was then that Easterbrook decided that an exorcism would be needed. Now his only challenge? Finding 6 other clergymen to help perform it. And like I said, this was a challenge, as the first couple of clergymen that were asked to help all declined, including his fellow Anglicans. It was then that the Reverend decided to reach out to Reverend John Wesley, who happened to be one of the founding members of the Methodist movement. He would also decline to participate, but 6 other Methodist priests accepted Easterbrook's proposition. One of these men was Reverend John Bolton, who actually knew of Lukins from before performing the exorcism. He met with George prior to the exorcism and stated, "Some time ago, I had a letter requesting me to take one of the 7 ministers to pray over George Lukins. I cried out before God, 'Lord, am I not fit for such a work? I have not faith to encounter a demoniac.' I was powerfully applied, 'God, in this thy might.' The day before we were to meet, I went to see Lukins and found such faith that I could then encounter the 7 devils which he said tormented him. I did not doubt but deliverance would come. Suffice to say, when we met, the Lord heard prayer and delivered the poor man." Now before we get into the exorcism, we have to talk about the criticism surrounding George at the time. Reverend Easterbrook and his colleagues had tried their best to keep the pending exorcism under wraps, but a series of letters sent to the Bristol Gazette made this impossible. Letters began to be published by the Bristol Gazette that questioned the validity of George's so-called possession. One letter written by Samuel Norman, a surgeon who at one point happened to live with Lukins in Yutton, accused him of faking his possession, and even argued that his antics seemed to be contagious. citing that other people also exhibited similar behavior. Norman even attacked the Methodists for buying into Lukins' lie. Now, interestingly enough, in this letter, he even admits to using brutal techniques to prevent people from showing signs of possession. And now, I mean, I don't know about you, but if I heard any medical professional admitting to doing something like this, that would just immediately discredit anything they have to say for me.
Same here, honestly. Like, I feel like they kind of just don't really see the patients as patients. They just kind of see like, oh, I just gotta deal with this thing. And so they just do whatever, I feel like.
Exactly. And it could be just something for the time, but at the same time, I would, think like even today, imagine showing up to the doctor and, telling them something like, oh, I think this would all go back to kind of like when most of the times people claim that they have, or they have like a demonic possession or they're being possessed. One thing that the Catholic Church does that I've come to like learn about is that they immediately will kind of do like some sort of like psychic evaluation or kind of evaluate their mental state, basically, right, to see that it's not some sort of mental illness, because subjecting somebody to a exorcism has been proven to like take a toll on like their individuals that get this performed on them. And there's been plenty of stories and cases of people having this exorcism performed on them, and some of them actually end up dead because the people that are performing them, they don't know what they're doing, and they're just really doing anything that they think may help. And in the end, this person wasn't really possessed, but they had some sort of like mental illness, and this could have been prevented if they would have got like the proper help. Again, like I said, I just think it's really bold of him to do this, especially just to kind of send this to the like local newspaper to get it printed and kind of say like, oh, don't believe him, he's a liar, this and that. I even torture these people who come in to see me, like, why would you say that, for one? And that just kind of just shows the type of person he is, like he just has something out for people like him, or maybe out for George in general. Well, despite these letters, the exorcism would still be performed, and it would be on Friday, June 13th, 1788. Reverends Joseph Easterbrook, John Valton, John Broadbent, Jeremiah Brettle, Benjamin Rhodes, Thomas McGeary, and William Hunt J. Westcote, along with 7 witnesses, set out to perform the exorcism of George Lukins. This exorcism was unique to those that we are familiar with today or in popular culture, and that would be a Catholic exorcism. So Lukins' exorcism was actually a Methodist exorcism. In some respects, they are similar, with both commanding the demon to leave, reciting prayer, and even singing hymns, all things the Church of England opposed at the time. During the singing of the hymns, Lukins' face became distorted and his body was subject to spasms. He was said to exhibit many of what we expect from exorcism, reciting blasphemies, speaking in different voices, and calling himself the devil. The following is said to be an accurate account of what occurred during the ritual. And I just want to preface this that I will not be reciting exactly everything that was written about in this ritual, because some of the things that he says, he kind of like recites things like in the name of the devil, I guess, or he's like said to kind of say like, oh, I claim I am the devil. So he'll say these sort of things like praising the devil and everything like that. And I, for one, am not going to repeat that because I don't want that energy.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I want to preface this. So some of this stuff is going to be sort of like paraphrased, but nonetheless, this is going to be actually taken from the excerpts that were written down from the actual exorcism itself. And so with that, I'll begin. He commanded his faithful and obedient servants to appear and take their stations. He swore by the devil that he would not quit his hold of him being George, and bid defiance to and cursed all who should attempt to rescue the miserable object from them. Another invisible agent came forth, assuming a different voice. A kind of dialogue was then sung in a hoarse and soft voice, alternately. At the conclusion of which, the man was thrown into violent agonies and blasphemed in a manner too dreadful to be expressed. He then personated and said, "I am the great devil." Sometimes he would set up a hideous laugh, and at other times bark in a manner indescribably horrid. After this, he summoned all the infernals to appear and drive the company away. And while the ministers were engaged in fervent prayer, he sang a Te Deum to the devil, in different voices praising the devil too. Whilst they were in prayer, the voice which personated the great devil bid them defiance, curling and vowing dreadful vengeance on all present. One in the company commanded him in the name of the great Jehovah to declare his name, to which he replied, I am the devil. The same person charged him in the name of Jehovah to declare why he tormented the man, to which he made answer, that I may shew my power against men. The poor man still remained in great agonies and torture, and prayer was continued for his deliverance. A clergyman present desired him to endeavor to speak the name of Jesus, and several times repeated it to him, at all which he replied, Devil. During this attempt, a small faint voice was heard saying, Why don't you adjure? On which the clergyman commanded, In the name of Jesus, and in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, the evil spirit to depart from the man, which he repeated several times, when a voice was heard to say, Must I give up my power? As this was followed by dreadful howlings. Soon after, another voice, as with astonishment, said, Our master has deceived us. The clergyman still continuing to repeat the adjuration, a voice was heard to say, Where shall we go? And the reply was, To hell, thine own infernal den, and return no more to torment this man. On this, the man's agitations and distortions were stronger than ever, attended with the most dreadful howling that could be conceived. But as soon as this conflict was over, he said in his own natural voice, Blessed Jesus! He became quiet, serene, and immediately praised God for his deliverance, and kneeling down, said the Lord's Prayer and returned his most devout thanks to all who were present.
What the heck?
Right. And so, everything that I read to you right now, it's not like it happened just as fast as I said it to you, right? The exorcism actually lasted a total of 2 hours. And many of the people in the religious community, including some of the people that were there to perform the exorcism, actually touted the ritual as, proof of success of the divine. They wanted to go around and show, hey, Jesus is real, God is real, praise the Lord. And yeah, so they were over here kind of showing look at what we did. Nobody else could have done this thing. But like I said, there were people that fought against this. They didn't believe it. They thought he was faking. And there was this debate going on. But nonetheless, after this exorcism, Lukins no longer experienced fits of possession following his exorcism and was said to have returned back to Yutton. Not much is known about his life after the exorcism, although it is said that he lived a life of poverty. Many of the things that I saw when I was researching said that he was sort of a beggar, I guess, He would go around and he literally didn't have enough money to go anywhere else, which is why he returned back to the little village that he was from. Because it was said that he actually really enjoyed his time there in Bristol, those times that he would visit the church. And he lived a sad life because he had to return and living a very poor life, which is very sad to think about. He went through all this stuff, whether people think that he faked it or not. If you think he faked it, obviously, clearly, there's something going on with him. This is not just something that, would happen to any healthy human being. Whether or not he's possessed, if you're in that belief or not, something was up with him. But following this, obviously, his life just took a turn for the worst. And it wouldn't be until February 8th of 1805 that news of his death was published in the Bristol Mirror. Many would go on to write about the events of the exorcism, and word soon spread throughout the country. Lukins became known as the Yutton demoniac, and his story would be told for centuries to come, and begged the question of whether he was truly possessed by 7 demons, or was this all simply one big hoax? And so I'll leave that question up to you guys, the listeners, and Samantha, I ask you the same question. What do you think happened in this case right here? Do you think that he was truly possessed by 7 demons or 7 devils? Or would you agree with Samuel Norman, right? That he was just faking it the entire time?
I'm not sure if I believe it fully, because I don't know. I just something I feel like I'm always just the kind of person that also wants to question things. I'm not gonna just take anything at face value. But I would find it very, very strange for him to just kind of put this big hoax and not get anything out of it. I feel like since the fact that after that he kind of just lived a solemn life of just being a beggar, how you said. And he didn't get famous. He didn't get any praise from the church for showing this is our faith saved this man. He wasn't helped by the church or anything like that after. It's not like he had to deal with the church or something and they were doing something. I feel like he definitely did have problems. I don't know, since they didn't really follow him after the possession, you can't really tell like if he truly changed, if he was just like truly just like a changed man that was just normal and just ended up having like a really poor life after. And so it's really hard to say, for me at least. I'm not sure. The fact that he was just left on his own at the end, I feel like it couldn't have been a hoax. He definitely believed he was possessed.
Okay, I think that's a really good answer. I mean, it's kind of hard to just choose a side, right? But the one thing that really intrigued me about this case is that obviously it's very old. It's one of like the most reported on reports of, an exorcism in history, for one. But not only that, it actually, it is history because this was performed towards the end of the 16th century, right? So 1778, kind of when this whole thing went down. And then obviously nothing was heard after this was performed about him, which is why a lot of people they don't know what happened to him. It's just kind of like accounts of people who knew of him that kind of said, yeah, he was very poor after this. I think that has to do with like the other thing, right? Like when you're making the argument for the case, thinking whether or not this is real, nowadays you go on TV and you say, oh, I'm possessed by the devil and 10 demons, you're going to get some sort of publicity, some sort of news coverage. You're going to be on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is. I have all these different accounts reposting. Is this man really possessed by the devil? Oh, next up, is this man really possessed by the devil? Like, you're going to have all these
next
things.
On Dr. Phil, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly,
yeah.
Right? You're going to be like the next Catch Me Outside, that girl right there. You're going to be the next sensation, basically. So what is it in the 1700s? Like, I don't think they had Facebook, obviously. They didn't have Twitter. They didn't have the social media that we have nowadays that gives these people this clout that they may be so hungry for. And this man had a really respectable career before this, He was a tailor. He really enjoyed the performing arts. That was one thing that they said in my research, is that he enjoyed doing these plays, and just so happened that, kind of this whole thing went down doing the thing that he loved the most. So again, like the way the story came about, for one, and the time period that it came out, it's just really hard to think whether or not, this was all faked. And I mean, I think that also begs the question that during this time period, obviously there was no real emphasis on mental health, mental illness like that. This is back in the day where they suspected one thing about you, chop off a limb or something, like they didn't know that could be a thing, right? So who's to say that he wasn't mentally ill? It's just weird that coupled with this, if you want to argue that he is mentally ill, that it also had like a physical aspect, right? The agitation of the right hand, they said it's like once it started agitating, that this meant, okay, he was going to have an episode. And then once it, started agitating again, okay, the episode's about to end. It's weird that he has like this physical element with it as well.
Mm-hmm. That was another thing I did want to talk about, was like just how old the case was. Because like it's pretty obvious, like in the way, and like the stuff that you read that happened during the exorcism, like this is obviously a very, very old thing that happened, just like in the way they were talking. That's what I was trying to think about and wrap my hand around too when I was thinking about like if it was a hoax or not. Like how would this benefit him back in the day? Because like the stuff you said about TikTok and like social media, all very true. And I was just trying to think, like it made me think like this is definitely not a hoax. It just made me wonder, maybe he was possessed, maybe he had mental health issues.
And so I actually do want to make a correction right here. I said 1778, it was actually 1788, so my apologies on that. But yeah, like in my eyes, there's no way that he just faked all of this. I do think, it's either he had mental illness or he was truthfully, possessed. Because I do believe in, possession, so I do think that's an actual thing. I'm not be that type of person that's gonna be like, oh, is this a special case of possession? And then, oh, I don't even believe in that. Like, what would be the point in that? But I truly do believe in possession and, this sort of evil. But was he truly possessed? I really don't know. And this has been a thing, is that this story, it's really famous if you were to search up possessions, right? Or exorcisms. But it's really hard to find evidence or sources for this story. So as like well known as it is in like, the world of possessions, it's not that well known by many people. So it's like one of those things in history, which for one, I just a huge history nerd. Like, I love history growing up. Like, that was my favorite subject because you learn about these different things that most people wouldn't know about. So this sort of like local and very obscure paranormal history, it's like some of my favorite things. And I mean, this won't be the last thing that we would cover on the podcast like that. And so actually, before we close out this episode, I did just want to show you basically a illustration that was made. So this is like going to be actually like a depiction of George and the seven clergymen, like basically surrounding him and kind of like showing him being exorcised. And so you're looking at it right now. At the very top, you see that it says, a miracle performed on the 13th June, 1788 at Temple Church, Bristol. So that's the church that it was performed at. That's the day that it was performed at. And you can see George is being held down by two people. And I can't really read exactly what are coming out like those like word bubbles. But you have all these people surrounding him. You know, they have like their hands together. They're praying clearly. And yeah, I mean, this is basically said to be like a depiction of exactly what happened in the church during that time.
I just had a question, like, this was created like after the event, like around the same time here. Like, how old is this drawing actually?
So that I don't know exactly. I tried to look for it, but honestly, a lot of these things surrounding the case are very, very hard to find because, like I said, there was numerous like writings people sending into the Bristol Gazette, talking about whether or not they believed it and whether they, did or not. Like, many people were talking about it. So there's actually even like compilations that people like made of like the different writings. So actually, I didn't mention it in my research, but Reverend Easterbrook, the guy that actually took on the case to, say like, hey, he actually is possessed. He actually put out basically like a memoir sort of thing, right, with his colleagues to fight back and kind of say, hey, this is not fake, because people, or that specifically that guy, right, Samuel Norman, he was just attacking everybody, and obviously this was not something that these religious figures would want, kind of like calling them out and saying that what they're doing is a hoax and fake because it's an attack on their religion, obviously. So he wrote basically what happened, and he had all these accounts from like the different people. And so you can, if you were to search up the George Lukins exorcism writings or narrative, these things will pop up, and it's very like old pamphlets. And so I guess what I was trying to say is very interesting to see how history comes about, because nowadays, like I said, if I were to go out and start saying, hey, I'm possessed, it's going to be everywhere. People are going to talk about it. And people are going to talk about whether I'm lying or whether it's true. Oh, I believe because of this, or no, he's a liar. He's, lied about this stuff in the past. It seems like a very modern version of this, right? I think one of the things I've seen on my research is that kind of like, think of a modern day Facebook. So this was put out into the press, and then you have all these people writing about it and putting their opinions, right? You can take like necessarily like, there's like comments, under a post. And everybody was just going back and forth, calling each other out like, no, you're lying, you're fake, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And it was just kind of like interesting to think back and relate it to times now.
It's definitely an interesting case, and I really like that you chose this one for like our first like exorcism case that we were discussing, because it's obviously like, I feel like it's the oldest case I ever heard of for an exorcism. A lot of interesting things happened in it as well. So yeah. Very cool thing to talk about this episode.
I, for one, did not know about this case until I was actually researching for the episode. So I'd be curious to know whether or not you guys heard about this too. So let us know. But with that, I'd like to end off by thanking my sources. Thank you to mentalfloss.com for the article 6 Chilling Historical Exorcisms, written by April Snellings on October 27th, 2021. Thank you to the Penguin Book of Exorcisms, published by Penguin Publishing Group on September 8th, 2020. Thank you to Bruminate.com for the article The Devil and George Lukins, a 1778 exorcism in Bristol, written by Dr. Romeo Vitelli on February 23rd, 2017. And finally, thank you to LastGaps.com for the article The Exorcism of George Lukins, written by Kyle T. Cobb Jr. I hope you guys like these cases that we brought to you guys. We're going to have many, many more of these in the future, many more, UFOs and exorcisms. But as always, you guys already know we're not going to leave you guys without something to talk about. And I know in the last episode I mentioned that we were sent something by one of our listeners, and that's actually what we're going to be covering at the end of this episode. And so I don't want to specifically name this or name drop this listener because I don't know whether or not they would like this. So, I mean, you know who you are. If you do want us to give you a shout out, let us know. I just didn't want to do it without you knowing. So, yeah. So, Samantha, do you want to tell us what it's about?
Yes. So basically, this is a true crime case of a woman attacking another woman. But the strange part of this, this whole case, is that the attacker, Allison Thompson Weaver, claimed that her and the victim were having consensual sex. That's not the weird part. What weirdly happened was that she claimed that the victim was a vampire and she was like a wolf. She was like a werewolf, basically. That's where it's like, what?
Yeah, so, it's the old case of vampires versus werewolves. But, I mean, very, very, worldly type of thing, this is that real world horror.
Basically what happened to get the police into this, obviously, since it's a true crime case, the police got involved, is that a person, I'm guessing, in the neighborhood heard the two women arguing. And so the police went over to the house, and when they had gotten there, they heard screaming and groaning for help at just at the front door. Someone was just screaming and asking for help. So obviously they went inside because that's scary, and they needed to help the person. They found the victim and Weaver both partially nude and covered in blood, absolutely covered in blood. And they had asked what happened, and that's when she said we were having sex or whatever. That's when she tells them, the police officer Hopkins, I believe is his last name, he tells them, she's a vampire and I'm a wolf. Right when the police get there, that's what she says and tells them. And the victim, she's in shock, she's just
right. It's very traumatic.
And so the police, what they found and when they had gotten there was a bunch of alcohol and some some prescription medication. And so that kind of hints at to the state of mind that Weaver was in, the attacker. One big thing about this is kind of ties in with the whole vampire and werewolf thingy, is that the victim had pieces of her cheek and her ear missing because Allison Thompson Weaver had bitten them off. So that kind of that's just so crazy to me. She just took off pieces of this poor lady's face and ear.
Yeah,
she
so
believed,
brutal.
Oh, she's a vampire, I have to fight her or whatever because I'm a werewolf.
Yeah, I mean, that should just show you guys, don't mix alcohol and pills. For one, we don't condone the use of drugs. Obviously, if you're gonna drink responsibly, but we're not gonna be telling you guys go out there and do drugs safely because that's not our place. But if you are going to do that, take care of yourselves. Obviously, don't mix things that you shouldn't be mixing. This is a very severe example of why you shouldn't do those things.
So Weaver was charged with second-degree criminal sexual conduct and assault with intent to do great bodily harm and assault with intent to maim, and also a fourth charge of assault by strangulation because she did choke this person. She absolutely fucked with this victim. Victim had so many bites, so many bruises all over their body. There was a long list, and it's this victim just really was attacked by this person.
Yeah, that's a brutal case. I'm surprised she didn't get charged with attempted murder after all that,
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. And you said that they bit off pieces of her cheek and her ear, and man, to just go as far as to do that, I'm sure the attacker obviously wasn't in the right state of mind, but that's no excuse, obviously. That's insane. Poor woman, man. Poor woman. I can't imagine going through that.
This was just one of the cases that, one of our listeners told us to look into. It was pretty interesting thing to read about because of the whole vampire and werewolf thing, but it is just a very sad case of someone attacking the other person. Do you think there's anything possibly supernatural to do with it? What are your opinions on this case?
I don't think so. It's one of those things where I feel also people, there's just one case that I think about. I don't know exactly where this happened, but I'm sure there's probably numerous examples, sadly, but a woman kills her kids and then claims that, oh, the devil made me do it. The devil told me to do it. Like one of those things. Obviously, like I said, she probably wasn't in the right state of mind because she's mixing alcohol and pills. So that could be one thing, and it could be that on top of mental illness as well, where she could be thinking these things or seeing these things. I don't think it's paranormal at all, but it has that sort of like aspect to it, obviously, because this person, it could be that they genuinely believed that they were a werewolf and they had to fight this vampire, but I don't. I just think this is probably something that's going to be a part of her defense that they could use to kind of say, hey, this person's not in the right state of mind, so let's not send him to prison, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm leaning towards too. Like, I don't think there's anything supernatural with it, obviously, and it's just a sad case to read about. But definitely, thank you to the listener for sending it into us. You guys could easily send us things like this to talk about at the end of our videos as well. We love it. We are very excited to see that email, and yeah, thank you to this person. Let us know if you would like a shout out.
Yeah, and like Samantha said, we were very excited to see that email. Like, I remember as soon as we got it in our inbox, I told Samantha, I was like, someone finally emailed us. And I was like, it's one of the first emails we've gotten. So, I mean, this is a perfect example. If you guys share it with us, no matter what it is, if it's an interesting article, an interesting TikTok, if it's a story you have, it doesn't even have to be your own story. It could be a story that your grandma told you. We've shared our grandma stories before, or your mom, or your cousin, whoever it is. It could be anybody's story. It doesn't have to be necessarily your very own.
And like today we're doing our first like alien and like exorcism story. Like, guys, don't be afraid. Like, you think we're maybe like, I know we've mostly covered mostly like ghost and entity type things, but like if you have an alien story, an abduction story, an exorcism story, if you have an exorcism story, please send it in.
Oh yeah, I definitely want to hear about that.
But like, don't be afraid to send us stories that maybe you think that we might not cover, because we'll still gladly cover it. As long as it's somewhere in the supernatural realm, we are interested in it all, basically.
Yeah, guys. And I mean, it's in the beginning of the podcast. It's basically, our slogan. We are the one-stop shop for all things supernatural. So whatever it is, if you have an encounter with a cryptid that nobody knows about yet, if it's something that only appears in your backyard, tell us. We want to share it with everybody. Let us know. And if you guys do want to share that stuff with us, you guys can share it to us at calaveriapod@gmail.com. And again, you guys can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and I would say Twitter, but the way things are looking with Twitter, I mean, we don't use it for one, really. And then, man, all that stuff with Elon Musk, whatever your opinions are on that man, I mean, he's obviously just tanking that app right now. But I would say Twitter, but if you want to, I mean, Calaveria Pod on all platforms as well. And again, guys, I mean, you guys can see all these pictures, everything that we talked about in the episode on our Instagram at calaveriapod. And yeah, I mean, feel free to follow us and comment on there. We always like to get you guys' feedback, and we would just love to see and hear from you guys. And if you guys do want to support the show, you guys can leave a review and a rating on any podcasting app that you listen on. If you guys are listening on an app where you're not able to leave a review, feel free to email it to us, anything to show your support. And we appreciate everybody, right? Lately, we've been seeing a lot more new listeners, and that just makes us happy to see that we're reaching a bigger audience. Feel free to share it with anybody that you think might enjoy the genre. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I don't have anything else. Samantha, how about you?
Nothing from me.
All right, then in that case, I think that's it. So we'll catch you guys in the next one. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year's.